Today, we're going to talk about one of the greatest deceptions in the history of art. It's the story of a guy who didn't just fool a few people, he fooled the entire world. And he didn't just steal a painting, he kind of stole the very idea of trust. So, how on earth did he pull it off?
Okay, I want you to just picture this. You're in a museum, one of those big, famous ones. It's quiet, almost reverent, you know? The lighting is perfect, and right there in front of you is this incredible painting.
And you're just totally lost in it. You're looking at the brush strokes, the colors. You can almost feel the history coming right off the canvas. And, of course, the little plaque next to it has a name you definitely recognize. A true legend, a master from centuries ago.
You're feeling that connection, right? That sense of awe. You've had a moment with a piece of history. But then, imagine you find out something later, something about that very painting. That's right. The whole thing, that masterpiece, that connection you felt, it was all a lie. A complete, unbelievably brilliant forgery.
And we're not talking about fooling some amateur here. This lie duped everybody. The absolute top dogs of the art world. We're talking the sharpest critics, wealthy collectors, and even the museum specialists who've spent their whole lives studying this stuff. They all fell for it.
So the big question is, how? How is that even possible? Well, it turns out the art world has this kind of hidden weakness. It all comes down to the huge difference between what a painting actually is and the story we're told it represents.
Okay, so think about it like this. You've got a beautiful painting, but nobody knows who painted it. It might be gorgeous, but it's probably not worth all that much. Now, take that exact same painting and add the signature of, say, the legendary Vermeer. Boom, suddenly it's worth millions of dollars. The painting itself didn't change one bit, but the story did. And that gap, that's the perfect loophole for a master forger. And this brings us to our guy, the man who saw that loophole and drove a truck right through it. His name was Han van Meegeren, and he is the mastermind behind this whole incredible story. See, back in the 1930s, Han van Meegeren was a pretty talented artist, but the art world's critics, they basically dismissed him, called his work unoriginal, old-fashioned, and that rejection, well, it stung. So he decided to get the ultimate revenge on the very establishment that shut him out. Now, his genius wasn't just in copying, it was in recreating. He was like a mad scientist. He'd hunt down actual 17th century canvases, scraping off the old paint. He mixed his own pigments, just like they did back then. He painted in the exact style of the Dutch master Vermeer. And then, this is the craziest part, he would bake the painting in an oven with chemicals to create centuries-old cracks. It was a scientific masterpiece of fraud. And guess what? It worked. Oh, it worked spectacularly. The experts weren't just fooled, they were ecstatic. They thought they discovered long-lost masterpieces. One of his fakes was even bought by a major museum and hailed as this incredible find. He had gotten his revenge. Big time. But this is where the story takes a wild turn. You think it's over? Not even close. After World War II, everything unravels, but in a way absolutely nobody could have predicted. Van Meegeren ends up on trial, but not for forgery. That's right, he was charged with treason, a crime punishable by death. See, it turned out that one of his Vermeer paintings had been sold to a high-ranking Nazi official. So, to the Dutch authorities, it looks like he had sold a priceless national treasure to the enemy. So, Van Meegeren is backed into a corner, and the only way to prove he wasn't a traitor was to admit he was a world-class con man. Can you just imagine that courtroom? He stands up and declares that the priceless national treasure was a worthless fake. The painting is a forgery, he said. I painted it. The irony here is just incredible. At first, no one believed his confession. The very experts he'd conned were so sure the paintings were real, they actually defended them. So in this unbelievable scene, he had to prove he was a forger. They made him paint another masterpiece in the style of Vermeer, right there under court supervision, just to prove he could do it. This whole story just makes you ask, why? Why was it so easy to fool them? I mean, these are the smartest people in the business. Well, the answer has less to do with the paint on the canvas and more to do with how our brains are wired. It really boils down to this powerful psychological quirk called confirmation bias. It means we all have a tendency to see what we want to see.
These experts were hoping, they were dying to discover a lost Vermeer. It would have been the find of a lifetime. So when Van Meegeren gave them something that looked the part, they weren't looking for flaws. They were looking for proof that their dream had come true. He wasn't just selling a forgery, he was selling them their own story back to them. And this whole unbelievable story forces us to ask some much deeper questions, about the very nature of art and value. What is a beautiful piece of art actually worth when we find out it's a lie? And there are really two ways to look at this. On one hand, you could say the paintings became worthless the second the truth came out. The value was in the name Vermeer, and without that, they're just pretty copies. But there's another point of view. Maybe the story of the forgery, the brilliant deception, the revenge, the trial, is so incredible that it gives the paintings a whole new kind of value. The lie itself becomes the work of art. So I'll leave you with this thought. If a painting is so technically brilliant and emotionally moving that it can fool the entire world into believing it's a masterpiece, does it really become worthless just because the signature is fake? And maybe that leads us to the real puzzle here. Is the value of art something you can prove, like a math problem? Or is its power, its meaning, and its value all found in the story, the one we choose to believe?